My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 47 years old, and I've learned that the most dangerous people in your life are the ones who know your childhood nickname. The ones who remember how you cried when your goldfish died, who held your hand on the first day of school, who promised to protect you forever, because those are the same people who know exactly where to twist the knife when they decide you don't deserve to breathe the same air anymore. 3 days ago, my sister tried to erase me from our grandmother's will, not with a conversation, not with an argument, with a forged signature and a lawyer who smiled too much, but to understand why what I did next shook her to the core, why she's now sitting in her pristine kitchen with trembling hands and a phone she's too terrified to answer. You need to understand the woman my grandmother raised, and the family that never quite forgave her for it. I grew up in a quiet Pennsylvania town where curtains moved more than people talked, the kind of place where everyone knows your business before you do, where secrets ferment in basements and rot behind white picket fences. Our house sat behind my grandmother's farmhouse, close enough for her shadow to fall over our lives, close enough that I could hear her humming old hymns through my bedroom window at night, close enough that there was nowhere to hide when she decided you needed to hear the truth. Grandma Ruth didn't believe in fair. She believed in truth. She'd stand in her kitchen with flour on her hands and devastation in her voice, telling you things you didn't want to hear but desperately needed to know. She never softened the edges, and she never, ever forgot a slight. My mother used to say that Grandma Ruth kept grudges, like other women kept recipes, preserved and potent, ready to be served cold decades later, and she always said one thing to me. Usually when my sister Claire would cry her way out of trouble or charm her way into extra dessert, Evelyn Blood remembers everything. She'd touch my cheek with her weathered hand and look at me with those steel-gray eyes that seemed to see through walls. Through time, through the pretty lies people told themselves, Blood remembers everything, child. Every kindness, every cruelty, every promise made and broken, and one day it settles accounts. I didn't know what that meant until last week. Until I stood in a lawyer's office that smelled like leather and old money, listening to a man I'd never met explain how my grandmother's estate, the farmhouse where I'd spent every summer learning to can vegetables and recognize lies, would be divided. How Claire, my younger sister, my supposed protector, had been making visits I didn't know about, filing papers I'd never seen, telling stories about me that would make a stranger blush. The lawyer kept glancing at a folder on his desk, brown, thick, filled with papers that apparently painted me as unstable, vengeful, undeserving. Claire had been building a case against me for months, maybe years. She'd documented every argument, twisted every disagreement, collected statements from relatives who barely knew me but remembered that one Thanksgiving when I drank too much wine, and told Uncle Frank exactly what I thought of his politics. But here's what Claire didn't know. Here's what none of them knew. Not my mother, who always chose her favorite. Not my father, who learned long ago that silence was safer than choosing sides. Not the cousins who showed up for holidays and inheritances, but never for the hard days in between. Grandma Ruth had taught me more than how to make pie crust and recognize a liar's tells. She'd taught me how to wait, how to watch, how to let someone think they've won right up until the moment you show them they never even understood the game they were playing. I didn't know what Blood remembers everything meant until last week. Until I opened the safety deposit box Grandma Ruth had left in my name alone, with a key she'd pressed into my palm the last time I saw her alive. When Claire was conveniently getting coffee and missing those final, crystalline moments of clarity. Until I read the letters. Until I saw the photographs. Until I understood that my grandmother had been settling accounts all along, and I was just the executor of a reckoning, 25 years in the making. 3 days ago, my sister tried to cut me out of an inheritance. What she doesn't know yet is that she's already lost everything that matters. And I'm just getting started. My sister Lydia was the beautiful one. Golden hair that caught sunlight like spun gold. A smile that could melt the heart of the cruelest teacher. Dimples that appeared exactly when she needed them most. The kind of child adults forgave before she even apologized, before she even finished destroying whatever she'd broken. A vase. Oh, accidents happen. A friendship. Well, girls will be girls. A reputation. Lydia was just misunderstood, just sensitive, just going through a phase that somehow lasted 20 years. I was the quiet one. The watcher? The one who sat in corners at family gatherings while Lydia performed. Who helped clean up after parties while Lydia received compliments. Who learned early that visibility was a trap and silence was a superpower. People think quiet children are simple, uncomplicated, maybe a little slow. They have no idea that we're recording everything, filing it away, building maps of everyone's weaknesses while they're too busy watching the pretty girl dance, while Lydia soaked up praise like a sponge absorbs water. Endless and greedy and never quite satisfied. Grandma Ruth taught me how to listen, how to read the pauses between words, the silences that screamed louder than arguments, How to notice when someone avoided a question, when their eyes flickered left before lying, when their voice went up half an octave because they were hiding something they thought you were too stupid to find, my parents thought. Grandma favored Lydia because she bought her dresses and piano lessons. They'd smile at each other over dinner when Grandma announced another gift, another opportunity, another reason for Lydia to preen and glow and forget to say thank you. My mother would whisper to my father, "At least Mother is bonding with one of them," as if I weren't sitting right there, as if I were furniture that happened to need feeding. They didn't see what she gave me. The real inheritance? The one that couldn't be wrapped in paper or tied with bows? While Lydia got satin and applause, I got something far more valuable. I got the truth about everyone. When I was 16, Grandma started calling me into her room late at night. Not to tell stories about the old days or share recipes or do any of the sweet grandmother things that people write about in greeting cards. To dictate memories, she'd sit in her chair by the window, the one that faced our house, the one where she could watch everything, and she'd talk in that low, steady voice that never wavered, never softened. Names, dates, arguments, things she said, might disappear if no one remembers them. She'd tell me about my grandfather's brother, who vanished with family money in 1952, about my mother's first engagement, the one she never mentioned, the one that ended when the man found out exactly what kind of family he was marrying into, about Lydia's real father, and why my dad's eyes went dead every time someone said she had his smile. She made me write everything down, in leather journals she'd bought specifically for this purpose, with my name embossed on the covers in gold lettering that seemed like a gift, but was really a burden. Every night for 2 years I filled pages with secrets that could detonate lives, with truths that people had buried under decades of careful lies and strategic forgetting. I thought it was dementia, some cruel unraveling of her mind, paranoia disguised as history, the dying grasping at relevance by inventing drama where there was only the boring march of ordinary time. I'd nod and write and wonder if I should tell my parents that Grandma was losing her grip on reality, that maybe we needed to consider options, facilities, medications that might quiet the conspiracy theories spilling from her lips. It wasn't. It wasn't dementia or delusion or the desperate fiction of a woman afraid of being forgotten. Every single word was true. Every accusation had evidence. Every story had witnesses, documents, proof that she'd hidden away in places no one thought to look. She wasn't losing her mind. She was arming mine, and 3 nights before she died, when Lydia was on vacation in Cancun, posting pictures of sunsets and margaritas, when my parents were at a dental convention in Pittsburgh, when it was just Grandma Ruth and me in that farmhouse that smelled like lavender and long memory, she told me the real reason she'd chosen me. Lydia is beautiful, Evelyn, but beauty is just a door that other people open for you. You're the kind of woman who picks locks in the dark and no one hears you coming. You're the one who'll make sure everything I've built doesn't get stolen by pretty liars and weak men who mistake silence for consent. She died 12 hours later. Peaceful, they said. In her sleep? As if any death could be peaceful when you know what I knew. When you're carrying enough secrets to burn down a family tree? Lydia came home from Mexico with a tan and tears that dried remarkably fast. She gave a beautiful eulogy. Everyone said so. I didn't speak at the funeral. I just watched, and I waited. Because Grandma Ruth had taught me one more thing in those late-night sessions. She'd taught me that revenge is a dish best served so cold that the person eating it doesn't even realize they're being poisoned until it's far, far too late. When Grandma Ruth died, Lydia flew in with lawyers before the flowers wilted, before the casket was even closed, before the minister had finished his meaningless platitudes about eternal rest and God's plan. She was already on the phone with estate attorneys whose hourly rate could feed a family for a month. I watched her through the funeral home window, pacing in her designer black dress that probably cost more than Grandma's entire wardrobe, gesturing with manicured hands, building her case before there was even a body in the ground. I arrived with a single suitcase and the old leather notebook Grandma had given me years ago. The one I'd filled with her midnight confessions, her whispered warnings, her meticulous documentation of every lie this family had ever told itself. It sat at the bottom of my bag like a bomb waiting for the right moment to detonate. The will reading was supposed to be simple, a formality. We'd gather in some wood-paneled office, listen to legal language about assets and distributions, split things reasonably like adults who'd shared a childhood and supposedly loved each other. My parents sat rigid in their chairs, my father's jaw working like he was chewing words he'd never say. My mother clutching a tissue she hadn't actually cried into. Instead, the lawyer cleared his throat 3 times, each one more uncomfortable than the last, and said words that made the air in the room turn to ice. Grandma Ruth revised her estate 6 months ago. He adjusted his glasses, shuffled papers that suddenly seemed very important. Wouldn't look at me directly before I tell you what was inside that safety deposit box? Do me a favor, hit that subscribe button right now, Because what Grandma Ruth left me didn't just change my life. It's about to change how you see family forever. Before I tell you what was inside that safety deposit box, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what Grandma Ruth left me didn't just change my life. It's about to change how you see family forever. Lydia smiled. Not a big smile, nothing obvious, just a small upturn at the corners of her mouth that she probably practiced in mirrors. The kind of smile that said she already knew what was coming, had known for months, had been sitting on this secret like a dragon sits on gold. Then he continued, and his voice carried the weight of an execution. Primary beneficiary of the farmhouse, the land, the investment accounts, and all personal property. Lydia Carter. The words kept coming. Legal terms. Dollar amounts? Assets I didn't even know existed. Everything Grandma Ruth had built over 73 years of living. Everything she'd saved and protected and promised would keep our family secure. All of it flowing in one direction. My name wasn't mentioned. Not once. Not as a secondary beneficiary. Not as a recipient of personal items. Not even as a footnote in a document that was supposed to represent my grandmother's final wishes. I sat there listening to my sister inherit my entire childhood, and I simply ceased to exist on paper. The room tilted. Or maybe I did. My mother made a small sound. Surprise or satisfaction? I couldn't tell which. My father stared at his hands like they held answers. The lawyer kept reading, his voice a drone that sounded like it was coming from underwater. Lydia squeezed my hand and whispered, her breath hot against my ear, intimate and poisonous. I'm so sorry. Evie, guess Grandma made her choice. Her fingers were soft, moist, the hands of someone who'd never worked a day in that farmhouse, never spent summers canning vegetables or winters splitting wood or springs planting gardens that would feed us. When money got tight, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. That's how I knew. When someone tells you they're sorry but can't look at you, they're not apologizing. They're gloating. They're savoring your pain while wearing the mask of sympathy. And they're counting on you being too devastated to notice the difference. I didn't cry, didn't rage, didn't give them the satisfaction of watching me break. I just nodded slowly, stood up and walked out of that office with my suitcase and my notebook and a clarity so sharp it could cut glass. That night, I drove to the farmhouse. The place where I'd spent every summer of my childhood, where Grandma Ruth had taught me to read people's lies and remember everything. The porch light was on, warm and welcoming, exactly as it had always been, except I found the farmhouse lock changed. New deadbolt, shiny brass that caught the moonlight and mocked me. My key, the one I'd carried for 20 years. The one Grandma had pressed into my palm when I turned 18 and told me this would always be home. Didn't fit anymore. My childhood bedroom sealed. I walked around to the window, the one I used to climb through when I stayed out too late, and found it painted shut deliberately recently. Someone had taken time to make sure I couldn't get in. Couldn't access the space where I'd grown up. Couldn't even look at the walls that held my memories. And taped to the door was a note in Lydia's handwriting. That perfect cursive she'd learned in those expensive penmanship classes Grandma had paid for. Please don't make this difficult. Please don't make this difficult. As if I were the problem. As if I were the one stealing inheritances and changing locks and erasing sisters from family history. As if my existence, my grief, my right to even question what was happening were just inconveniences she'd rather not deal with. I stood there in the cold October night, looking at that note, and something inside me that had been sleeping for years woke up hungry. That's when I opened Grandma's notebook for the first time in years. Right there on the porch, under the light that Lydia had forgotten to turn off, I flipped through pages filled with my teenage handwriting. Names, dates, secrets, and tucked into the back, in an envelope I'd never noticed before, was a letter in Grandma Ruth's shaking script. Evelyn, it began, if you're reading this, then Lydia has already made her move. Good. Let her think she's won. Now it's time to show her what winning actually costs. My hands stopped shaking. The night stopped feeling cold, and I smiled in the darkness, the kind of smile that would have terrified anyone who saw it. Lydia had changed the locks, but Grandma Ruth had given me keys to things far more valuable than doors. Inside were not memories. They were confessions, accusations, evidence that could ruin lives and rewrite histories in turn. Family trees into crime scenes. The pages weren't the nostalgic ramblings of an old woman trying to preserve the past. They were indictments, each one meticulously documented, cross-referenced, dated with the precision of someone who knew exactly what kind of weapon she was building. My father's gambling debts, $37,000 lost in Atlantic City over 18 months in 1998, the loan sharks he'd borrowed from when the credit cards maxed out, the reason we'd almost lost our house, the reason my mother had gone back to work at the pharmacy with that tight smile that never reached her eyes, all of it documented in Grandma's neat handwriting. With copies of IOUs and threatening letters my father thought he'd destroyed. my mother's secret hospital stay, 3 weeks in a psychiatric facility in 1995 that the family called a spa retreat. Diagnosis: severe depression with suicidal ideation. The pills she still took every morning that she told us were for blood pressure. The therapist she still saw every Thursday that she claimed was a book club. My grandfather's second family. Children in Ohio who carried his name and his nose and his blood, who sent Christmas cards to an address Grandma kept separate, who received checks every month until he died. Half-siblings I'd never met. Cousins who existed in the margins of our family, like ghosts with bank accounts. And then, Lydia. The pages changed here. The handwriting got tighter, angrier, the pressure of the pen nearly tearing through paper in places. Pages and pages of dates, lies, and payments. A chronology of deception so thorough it must have taken years to compile. A child support ledger that didn't belong to our father. Monthly payments made by someone named Marcus Holloway from 1979 until 1997, ending exactly when Lydia turned 18. Amounts that increased over time from $200 a month to nearly $1,000. My father's name nowhere on the documents. Letters Grandma never sent. Drafts, dozens of them, addressed to Marcus Holloway, some pleading, some threatening, all of them demanding he acknowledge his daughter. Take responsibility. Stop pretending the affair with my mother had never happened. Your daughter has your eyes, one read. She has your talent for lying, too. Medical records photocopied decades ago. Paternity tests from a lab in Philadelphia, dated 1979, DNA results that proved what everyone had apparently known except me. Lydia wasn't my full sister. She was my half-sister. The product of my mother's affair with a married man who'd paid handsomely for silence. Birth certificates, both versions. The original with Marcus Holloway listed as father, and the amended one with my father's name added 6 months later. After what Grandma had noted as the arrangement, even my father's drinking problem suddenly made a different kind of sense. One sentence was underlined in red. The ink so fresh it looked wet in the moonlight. Lydia believes the will is the end. She doesn't know about the trust. Trust. My heart hammered against my ribs. I flipped through the remaining pages frantically, looking for more, but they were blank. Grandma had left me a cliffhanger in her own death. A breadcrumb trail that required me to be smart enough, angry enough, desperate enough to follow. I drove to Grandma's old bank the next morning, the notebook hidden in my bag, like contraband, like explosives. First National, the building where she'd done business for 50 years, where she knew every teller by name and baked them cookies at Christmas. I walked in at 9 o'clock exactly, before the caffeine had worn off and the courage could fade. The manager went pale when I gave my name. Actually, pale, color draining from his face like someone had opened a valve. His hand shook slightly as he gestured toward his office, and he looked over his shoulder twice, as if checking whether we were being watched. "She told us you'd come," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. He sat behind his desk but didn't lean back, didn't relax, stayed perched on the edge like he might need to run. Mrs. Ruth was very specific, very insistent about the timing. She said you'd arrive within a week of the will reading. That we'd know because you'd be the one who looked like you'd stopped believing in anything. He opened his desk drawer with trembling fingers. And then he handed me a safety deposit box key. Old brass worn smooth from years of use. Attached to a tag with a number I didn't recognize. Box 447, he said. It's been paid up for the next 50 years. She wanted to make sure no one could touch it, close it, claim it. It's yours alone. Your name is the only one on the account. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. Your sister came by yesterday asking about Mrs. Ruth's accounts. I told her everything was settled according to the will. I didn't mention this. My fingers closed around the key, and it was still warm from his hand from his fear, from the weight of whatever secrets it unlocked. Inside the vault, in the cold silence where secrets lived in metal boxes, I opened for 47. Inside was a second will, dated 2 weeks before Grandma died, notarized, witnessed by 2 people I'd never heard of, legally airtight according to the stamps and seals that covered it like armor. This version told a different story. This version named me as primary beneficiary of everything that actually mattered, and beneath it, a sealed envelope labeled in Grandma's handwriting, slightly shaky now but still unmistakably hers. For Evelyn when Lydia tries to steal what isn't hers. I tore it open right there in the vault. Couldn't wait, couldn't breathe until I knew. The letter inside was short, brutal, perfect. My darling girl, it began, if you're reading this, then your sister has played exactly the hand I knew she would. The will she inherited was theater, a test. I wanted to see if she'd be gracious or greedy, if she'd share or hoard, if she'd prove me wrong about who she really is. She failed, didn't she? Now it's time to collect what's actually yours, and to teach Lydia the most important lesson she ever learned. In this family, blood blood remembers everything, and blood always settles accounts. I walked out of that bank with documents that would change everything. With proof that the entire will reading had been a trap, with evidence that my grandmother had been playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers, Lydia thought she'd won. She'd changed the locks, claimed the farmhouse, erased me from the narrative, but she'd forgotten the most important rule Grandma Ruth had ever taught us. The most dangerous woman in any room is the one everyone underestimates. And I was done being underestimated. The second will didn't give me the house. It gave me something far more powerful. Something Lydia, with all her charm and manipulation, could never fight. It gave me authority, control, the keys to every skeleton Grandma Ruth had carefully locked away for decades. It named me executor of a private family trust, one that controlled not just assets, but information. The kind of information that doesn't just redistribute wealth, it redistributes power. It redefines reality. The trust held deeds and accounts, yes, but more importantly, it held truth. Documents that could rewrite our entire family history with the stroke of a pen. With a single phone call to the right lawyer, the right newspaper, the right person who'd been waiting years for this story to finally surface. Included were DNA results, not old faded copies from decades ago. Fresh tests conducted just 8 months before Grandma died. Professional lab work with timestamps and verification codes and results that couldn't be disputed or explained away. Blood doesn't lie, Grandma used to say, and these results screamed truth so loud it made my ears ring. Lydia wasn't my sister. The girl I'd grown up with, shared a bathroom with, fought with over clothes and boys, and who got the last piece of pie, wasn't my sister at all. She was my cousin. My mother's sister's daughter, conceived during an affair that had nearly torn the family apart. Born into a lie that had somehow become accepted fact. Our father had raised her to cover up an affair that would have destroyed his political career. Back then, he'd been running for state senate, positioned to win. The golden boy with the perfect family and the bright future. Then his sister-in-law got pregnant by his campaign manager, and suddenly the perfect family was a ticking bomb. So they made a deal. My mother would claim the baby as hers, premature, delivered early while visiting family. My father would raise Lydia as his own. The campaign manager would disappear to Ohio with a generous severance package, and everyone would smile and lie and pretend. Grandma Ruth had protected the family. She'd kept the secret, paid the bills, made sure the right people stayed silent. She'd watched her son-in-law build a career on a foundation of deception. Watched her daughter transform into someone who could look her own niece in the eye and call her daughter. She'd protected them all. Until now, until she decided that protection had an expiration date. And that date was the moment Lydia proved she'd learned nothing about loyalty, about family, about the difference between what you're owed and what you steal. That evening, I invited Lydia to dinner. Called her cell phone, kept my voice steady and defeated, the voice of someone who'd accepted their fate and just wanted to make peace. Can we talk? I asked. Just us. No lawyers. No parents. I need closure, she agreed immediately. Probably couldn't believe her luck. Probably thought I was calling to surrender. I cooked her favorite meal. Chicken piccata, the recipe Grandma had taught us both. With lemon and capers and butter that made the house smell like every good memory we'd supposedly shared. I set the table with Grandma's good china, the plates Lydia thought she now owned. Poured wine into crystal glasses, lit candles, made it look like a peace offering, a white flag dinner. Let her talk. She arrived wearing the pearl necklace Grandma used to wear on Sundays, already claiming artifacts like a grave robber. She talked about her plans for the farmhouse renovation ideas, maybe turning Grandma's bedroom into a home office. She talked about feeling so grateful that Grandma had trusted her with the legacy. She even teared up, actual tears she'd probably practiced. Talking about how she'd make sure I could visit sometimes. Let her gloat. She was good at it, had clearly been rehearsing. She touched my hand across the table. Said things like, I know this is hard for you, and maybe this is for the best, and you were always more of a free spirit anyway. Each sentence a tiny knife, delivered with a smile. She thought she was being kind, magnanimous, the gracious winner consoling the deserving loser. Then, I slid a single document across the table. Just one page, placed carefully beside her wine glass, positioned so she couldn't miss it but had to choose to look. Her birth certificate, the original one, the true one. Names she'd never seen before in the spaces where she thought she knew who she was. Medical details that told a different story. A stamp from a hospital 3 states away where her real mother had given birth, while my mother was conveniently visiting family. Her smile collapsed. Not slowly, not gracefully. It fell off her face like a mask that had lost its adhesive. Color drained from her cheeks. Her hand froze halfway to her wine glass. She stared at the document like it was written in a language she almost recognized, but couldn't quite translate. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. Volume is for people who lack ammunition. I kept my tone conversational. Friendly even, The way you'd discuss weather or gardening or anything that didn't matter. I just said words I'd practiced until they sounded casual, inevitable. I can contest the will, or I can release the trust documents, she whispered, her voice breaking on the second word. All that practiced poise evaporating into desperate confusion. It wasn't a statement. It was a prayer. A plea to a god who'd already left the building. I leaned closer, close enough to see the mascara starting to run at the corners of her eyes. Close enough to smell her expensive perfume mixing with fierce sweat. Close enough that she could see I wasn't bluffing, wasn't negotiating. Wasn't the quiet sister who'd spent 47 years being underestimated. Grandma taught me to remember everything. I let the words hang there. Let them sink in like poison. Every lie you told. Every time you made me feel small. Every moment you chose yourself over family. I paused, watched her hands start to shake. She also taught me that blood remembers, and blood settles accounts. I reached into my bag and pulled out the rest of the documents. Stacked them on the table between us, like a growing tower of truth. DNA results. Affidavits from witnesses Grandma had tracked down over decades. Letters from Marcus Holloway's legitimate children who'd known about Lydia all along. Bank statements showing the hush money that had flowed for years. Everything. Here's what's going to happen, I said. My voice still calm, still terrifyingly steady. You're going to sign papers transferring the farmhouse back to the estate. You're going to split Grandma's actual assets 50-50 with me, the way she would have wanted if you'd been decent. And you're going to do it quietly, gracefully, with a smile on your face. And if I don't, she'd found some defiance, some spark of the fighter she thought she was. I smiled then, the smile I'd inherited from Grandma Ruth, cold, patient, certain. Then I release everything. Every document, every secret, every lie. Mom's affair with her sister's husband. Dad's political career built on fraud. Your entire identity exposed as a cover-up. I'll give it to the newspapers, the genealogy websites, every busybody in this town who's been waiting 30 years for a scandal worth talking about. I stood up, walked to the door, opened it. Cool October air rushed in, carrying the smell of burning leaves and endings. You have 48 hours. After that, I do what Grandma Ruth always said blood would do. I remember everything. And I make sure everyone else remembers too. Lydia sat there in the candlelight, surrounded by her lies, holding her fake birth certificate, finally understanding what it felt like to be erased. I walked out of that dinner and didn't look back. The chicken piccata went cold on the table. The wine sat unfinished. The good china would need washing, but for the first time in 47 years, I felt exactly like the woman Grandma Ruth had raised me to be: dangerous, patient, unforgettable. Lydia didn't just lose the inheritance, she lost something far more fundamental, something you can't rebuild with lawyers or money or time. She lost her name. Not legally, not on paper, but in the way that actually matters. Every time someone calls her Lydia Carter now, there's a question mark hanging in the air that only she can hear. Every family photo on her wall is a lie she has to live with. Every childhood memory has been recontaminated, rewritten, transformed from truth into theater. Her father's legacy, the man she'd called Dad for 38 years, who'd walked her down the aisle, who'd taught her to ride a bike and balance a checkbook, wasn't her father at all. He was her uncle, a politician who'd made a bargain to save his career and spent decades living with a child who reminded him every single day of his wife's betrayal and his own cowardice. Every I love you he'd ever said to her was now shadowed by obligation, by duty, by the knowing question of what he'd really felt behind those forced smiles. Her sense of belonging. That's what I really took from her. Not money or property or inheritance, but the fundamental human certainty of knowing where you come from, who your people are, where you fit in the story. I took her origin and revealed it as fiction, and there's no amount of therapy or wine or geographic distance that can give that back. She left town before sunrise. I know because I was awake, sitting in my apartment with coffee I didn't drink, watching my phone light up with messages I didn't answer. First from my mother, panicked, accusing, demanding I explain what I'd done. Then from my father, shorter, colder, telling me I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Then from Lydia herself, a single text at 4:17 in the morning. I hope you're happy now. I wasn't happy. I was something else entirely. Something Grandma Ruth would have recognized. Satisfied, complete. Like a debt paid, an equation balanced. A promise kept to a woman who died believing that truth, eventually, would matter more than comfort. But here's the part that still keeps her awake. The part that texts me sometimes at 3 in the morning with variations of the same desperate question. The part that's driven her to change her number twice and her address 3 times and her entire life into something unrecognizable. I never contested the will. The one she'd worked so hard to manipulate, the one she'd forged signatures for, the one she'd built her entire scheme around. I let it stand exactly as it was written. Let her remain the primary beneficiary. Let her keep the house she'd stolen, the one she'd changed the locks on, the one she thought was her grand prize. I let her keep the house. Every square foot of it. The farmhouse with its creaking floors and drafty windows and memories soaked into the walls. The property she'd coveted, schemed for, lied to obtain. It's hers, legally and completely. The deed has her name on it. The taxes come to her address. She won. Because 3 days ago I did something else. Something quieter. Something that doesn't make headlines or require dramatic confrontations or involve anything that looks like revenge from the outside. I filed the trust papers, made them official, activated all the clauses Grandma Ruth had so carefully constructed, each one a tripwire, each one a consequence. With one clause activated, just one, buried in the legal language, easy to miss if you're not looking for it, devastating if you understand what it means. Every document in that trust, every secret, every DNA result, every letter and photograph and piece of evidence that could destroy what's left of our family's reputation, becomes public record if she ever claims family rights again, if she tries to access family medical histories, public if she shows up at family funerals as a daughter, public if she uses the family name in any legal capacity beyond basic identification, public if she fights for any inheritance, any claim, any right that comes from being a Carter, public. So now she lives knowing one thing, carrying it like a stone in her chest every single day, waking up with it, going to sleep with it, unable to escape it no matter how far she runs or how much she drinks or how many therapists she pays to help her process the unfairness of it all. The truth is sitting in a vault. All of it, documented, verified, sealed, and waiting. And I hold the key. Not metaphorically, literally. Box 447 at First National Bank. Paid up for 50 years. Containing every secret that could detonate her life and the lives of everyone she's ever claimed to love. I carry that key on my keychain now, right next to my car key and apartment key. A small brass reminder that power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just patient, she calls me sometimes. Hangs up before speaking. I know it's her because I recognize the area code from wherever she's landed this month. Vermont, last I heard. Or maybe it was Oregon. She's moving a lot, restless, trying to outrun something that lives in bank vaults and legal documents and the deep, unforgiving memory of women who refuse to forget. She sent a letter once, 3 weeks after she left, handwritten, no return address, full of rage and grief and the kind of desperate justification people manufacture when they can't face what they've actually done. You've destroyed everything, it said. You've turned our family into a weapon. You've made yourself into something Grandma would have hated. I didn't respond. Didn't need to, because Grandma Ruth had left me one final letter, one I hadn't shared with anyone, tucked into the very back of that safety deposit box. Evelyn, it read, if you've done what I think you've done, if you've let Lydia keep the house while holding the truth over her head like a sword that might fall at any moment, then you've understood me perfectly. Some people need to lose everything to learn anything. But you, my darling girl, you've learned that the cruelest mercy is letting someone keep what they stole while ensuring they can never enjoy it. Make her live in that house. Make her walk those floors. Make her sleep in rooms where every shadow whispers what she really is. That's not revenge. That's education. Grandma was right. She was always right, even when her rightness felt like violence. Even when her truth cut deeper than any lie. Blood remembers everything. Every kindness ignored. Every cruelty inflicted. Every choice that prioritized self over family. Greed over grace. Winning over what's right, and some inheritances are far more terrifying than money. The inheritance I gave Lydia wasn't wealth or property or the comfort of unexamined lies. It was consequence. It was uncertainty. It was the permanent, unshakable knowledge that her entire life exists at my discretion. That with one phone call, one filed document, one moment of deciding I'm done being merciful, everything she's built on sand could wash away. She lives in that farmhouse now. I know because the lights are on sometimes when I drive by late at night. She's kept the porch light burning, the one Grandma always left on. Maybe she thinks it looks welcoming. Maybe she's hoping it looks like home. But I know different. I know she sits in those rooms jumping at sounds. I know she sees that envelope in her mind every time she closes her eyes. I know she wakes up wondering if today is the day I decide enough is enough. And the most beautiful part, the part that would make Grandma Ruth smile, that cold, satisfied smile, Lydia will never know. She'll spend the rest of her life waiting for me to release those documents to pull that trigger. To end her as completely as she tried to end me, but I won't. Because Grandma taught me something more valuable than revenge. She taught me that the anticipation of destruction is often more devastating than destruction itself. That uncertainty is its own exquisite punishment. That letting someone live in fear of what you could do is infinitely more powerful than actually doing it. 3 days ago, my sister tried to cut me out of our grandmother's inheritance. What I did next didn't just terrify her. It taught her that some debts can never be paid, some lessons can never be unlearned, and some women should never ever be underestimated. Blood remembers everything, and I am my grandmother's granddaughter in every way that matters. The farmhouse is hers. The fear is eternal, and the key stays on my key. A small brass promise that justice, real justice, doesn't always look like winning. Sometimes it looks like making sure the winner never sleeps peacefully again. If you think Lydia got what she deserved, hit that like button and subscribe, because some family secrets are just beginning to surface. And trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next.